just wait and then reconcile at the end of December. Even though our contract with the department runs through December, there are some different issues there that we wanted to make sure we covered. Overall, the report's been passed out. It's all over the world at this particular point in time. I don't know that anybody doesn't have a copy. It makes some very good suggestions, very detailed suggestions. One of the things that I talked with some of my colleagues about at the other LMEs, and they're discussing it right now as well, is some of the detailed suggested reports that we created and modified and that we would create. Our goal is to begin implementing those and getting those reports up as soon as we possibly can and move forward with implementing those activities. Part of that relates to the revised plan. We submitted an original plan to try to incorporate some of the feedback that we received, and Charlie will kind of highlight some of those issues at this point. Charlie? Questions? Sure.
Before Charlie comes, maybe some questions. Author, one of the things that you mentioned is Mercer has been here 3 times prior to this. Were any of the things that Mercer has identified in this last review part of anything that they had identified previously? I mean, I know that they were here, and one of the concerns that I have is the fact is that this board was concerned about us moving this quickly, and we said, are we sure we're ready? And Mercer came in, and I believe they said, looking at it, that we were ready at that point in time. I'm just questioning, were there things that they identified in this last time, the things that were identified early on? I don't know the answer to that.
I think the report writing, the detailed reports, and I think that's the thing that they really zeroed in on this report, the things that they mentioned in previous reports, that there was concern about our IT system. And did we have the capabilities within our system to generate all the reports and all the data that we needed to have in order to move forward with the waiver? We felt that we did. It looked like we had enough data to be able to reach those conclusions. I think some of the factors that we identified here in terms of those, those authorization rollovers, et cetera, some of those kinds of things, we didn't account for. I don't think anyone accounted for those kinds of activities. I think the overutilization of the the overutilization of PRTFs was an issue that no one could anticipate at that particular point in time. So I don't think that there were things that that we didn't do that they said we should do from previous reports. I think it's as a managed care, and I think they're really saying, hey, you're 7 months into this. In 7 months, we would really like to be able to see these level of reports, these detailed kinds of reports. And we don't have that. We didn't have those detailed reports. One of the things I shared with her, with the lady in charge of the process was, one of my most frustrating portions of this process has been our responsibility to provide to you, the board, and to the department the PBH reports, and that our staff spent a lot of time trying to create all of those dashboards and report forms and data sets that were required under House Bill 916 to comply with that. And I remember many a meeting, Mandy saying, well, where are the data reports? Where's the dashboard report, et cetera, and really focusing on those things. And I remember talking to George, our IT person, saying, these reports aren't even damn good. They don't help us with anything. How is this helpful? But with the reports that we had to have, that we were supposed to generate, so we did. We spent our time doing what we thought we needed to do to be compliant. In hindsight, we'd have been better off to say, well, we'll be a little later on those reports. Let's focus on some other kinds of things. We didn't do that. We produced the documents and reports that we had to according to our understanding. Probably should have looked at some of the other areas. So I think that to say that the weakness that they saw early on was, is our IT system capable of handling all the billing claims and so forth? Yeah, we've done that. We've managed that and so forth. The reporting, generating data, information about trend analysis, that type of stuff, we don't have a whole lot of that. We've worked on it. We did really good with our IBNR before with the state funds and managed those very effectively. This one has thrown us a few curves in terms of access and ability to be able to control some services.
Arthur, sounds like there was a flurry of activity right after the 4th of July, the week after the 4th of July. A lot of stuff going on here, getting reports, talking to Raleigh. Was Was the board informed of that, or the executive committee informed of that?
Only, you know, when we realized that we had these issues, and I guess that was, you know, it was like, is this a glitch? And I think that was I didn't want to panic people either. I mean, I wanted to know what's going on. You know, the May data that we received in mid-June, again, as I say, created some concerns, some issues. Let's find it. Is this really a trend? Or is this a glitch in this month, and can we anticipate changes? And when we looked into our system in terms of costs that are out there that are continued going forward, it didn't look like that this was going to be just a glitch for the month of May as we were looking at the data. And that's when Sharon and folks said, oh, wait a minute, this is it, we need to, and we communicated as best we could as soon as we could, I think.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering.
We also wanted to have a plan. I
Yeah.
guess that was the issue. We really struggled with on the 27th is, do we talk about this at this particular point in time, or do we develop a plan of action to say, well, this is what we've identified this area, here's our plan of action of what we think we ought to do and how we ought to do it, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And we talked about that in our staff meetings and review, and decided, you know, we just need to lay the numbers out there.
Yeah.
And we know people are going to freak, and there's going to be a reaction to it, but we're better off laying the numbers out there and then taking some time to develop a plan to respond to those numbers, rather than having the department or someone else, or the board or community say, well, how come you didn't tell us this when you were convinced it was there? And on the 25th, 26th, 27th, we were convinced and
yeah,
gave that information.
I guess as a board member, I'm not prone to panic.
Mm-hmm.
But to know, hey, we've got a problem, we're not sure what it is, we're digging into it, and then this is what we're finding along the way. It seemed to me like this all happened in a week, like with the 17th and 18th, and that's, I guess that's kind of, I felt blindsided. And when I checked with, and then I thought, well, I missed the June board meeting, so or at least the first June board meeting, so that was it. And then when I checked around, other board members weren't aware of it either.
Right.
So I guess that's it, just in terms of being on a board, knowing, so that if somebody says something to me, I can say, well, yeah, we're aware of it, and I know it's being worked on. We don't have the details yet, or something like that. So I guess my request would be to know. Don't have to know the details. Don't have to have it all figured out. Just know, hey, we've got a problem and we're working on it. That's.
Sure.
And just to follow up a little bit on that, I feel like that's something this board's been so clear about. We went through this with the first waiver contract, we went through it with a hospital contract, we went through it with a Buncombe County lease, we went through it with leasing properties in other counties where we said, we have to know on the front end. I mean, I feel like we've been so clear on the no surprises, and it feels like we talk to everybody, but to be honest, but I don't guess that's a question.
I want to ask a question. The Mercer report, would you tell me the process of the distribution of that Mercer report? Because I'm a little, I guess, frustrated and upset. The fact is that as I was in Raleigh on Tuesday, that the next day a member of the DWAC was sending this report out to a lot of different people. And can you tell me the process of where did the report, the Mercer report, go to?
It came to me from the department. I forwarded it to board members in the format that it was sent to us in. We then later sent it to board members in a format that you could print rather than copy protected, and to the management team here at Western Highlands. And the department did not send it to anyone else. They were very clear about that. That was not, they wanted it to come to us and to the board to be aware of it. And
so any distribution of that report then that got out to other members throughout the state, which I received, which said it was sent to Virginia, Tennessee, South Carolina, and everybody else, had to be through our people?
yes. It was either came from our staff or our board.
Through our staff?
Either our board or our staff. One of the two, yes.
That is, to me, is not acceptable.
I'm enviable, I couldn't even open it.
I couldn't
It was
open it.
encrypted. I wish
I
somebody'd send it to me.
I couldn't,
back
I
then.
couldn't open it either, but then I read it, but the next day, we could open it, but again,
That's
that
right, that was
was
the-
infuriating to get something from a DWAC member in another part of the state that was issuing this report to everybody else.
Yeah, and, you know, and I guess that's, you know, I mean, we don't want to believe, but, you know, there have been a number of reports that, I mean, you know, and I don't know whether the reports are going from, it's public documents, and I guess that's the other thing. I mean, you know, it's a public document, it was sent to the board, the board member can send it if they wanted to, but, you know, there've been a few.
Arthur, I
the
think he's
language-
upset that he got it
Somewhere.
in a different route, and other people got it before he as a board member did. Correct me if I'm wrong, Arthur.
No, you're right, and the fact that this was an item of concern that it was at the DWAC meeting, which the state
Right, yes.
worked with us on
Yes.
to minimize that before this board had an opportunity to even
Right.
talk about it. I guess the other question is about the report that the state, you said the News and Observer had seen this. Are those reports that you send in to the state, are they basically public record?
They are public record, but, I mean, again, that report was sent to board members and to the department. It was not sent to the providers or anyone else. So the lag report and the plan of correction that the draft plan that we submitted were only sent to board members and to the department.
First I got comments of it was out of Winston-Salem Journal.
Yeah, it's amazing. It seems like that we've got somebody here in Western Highlands that wants to stir the pot or something else to let information go out before even the board is aware of some of the things and so forth. So that's very discomforting.
Another disturbing thing to me too was, Arthur, when you did have the report sent out, the report didn't come out from you. It came from Jolene to us.
Right, I was
And
out of
think you
town.
should have covered, that should have been done by cover letter from you to us.
So I was out of town when the
That
report
might
came
be
in.
something we want to talk about in closed session.
Yeah.
Okay. Charlie? Charlie Lee? Okay.
I think you've all got a copy of the plan. Actually, there's probably gotten copies of a couple of versions of the plan, and this will continue to be a work in progress. So we will continue to revise and refine this as we go along. And I'm just going to go through the highlights here. If you've got questions about particular details, I'll do my best to clarify those. The first area we're intending to address is claims review. During startup, we had some loose edits, and we will review some of those edits, especially on some high-end services like ACT, ICFMRs, et cetera. And we've made some estimates there about what sort of savings that might generate, the industry standard being 3%. So that's claims review. The second would be...
Can we ask why he's going through it on the first point? Sure. So the way I read this is so that we might be able to recoup, based on what has occurred previously through March, we might be able to recoup somewhere about $200,000. So we might be able to, but going forward, that's not the case. In other words, we might be able to recruit, by doing this right now, we might be able to recoup from the first quarter about $200,000 of savings. So that would give us $200,000 to go towards a deficit. But going forward, the way I read it, you're saying savings would likely diminish. So what type of estimate are you saying that for this year that we ought to be able to recoup? Is it 200,000 plus maybe another 100,000 or $200,000 for the 12-month period? So what's your estimate?
My estimate will be a guess.
Well, I know.
I think looking at that, if providers continue to bill in the same way, then maybe 100,000 would be a guess.
So you're saying maybe 100,000 per month. So
Yeah.
you're saying.
So that would be a combination of us, running edits and saying, no, this doesn't pass the edits, and also providers learning that if I submit it this way, it's not going to pass the edits, so I'm not going to submit it this way.
Okay, so we're looking at for the first 2-3 months, maybe $600,000, $200,000 per month, right? I'm just trying to help. So that's $600,000 for this, and then $100,000 a month thereafter, which is 9 months. So we could potentially get $1.5 million.
Potentially.
Okay, so, but you're
How
saying.
big's that word potential, Charlie?
Very big.
It's a guess, you know.
But again, I'm just trying to look and see here about if we're looking to try to set a plan, what's some of the potential that we potentially could do.
And I think it'd be wise to estimate conservatively.
Right.
I think the other part we have to understand is what are the impacts to providers. I mean, and I get we are a managed care organization, but I also get providers are the way people get served. So I think that, I mean, I'm not saying you have to answer that right now, but I think that's the offset. We got to know with everything you put on the table.
You're absolutely right. If we get too draconian with this and put half of our providers out of business, that's probably not going to hurt. Okay, number 2 is deadlines for submission. We've been indulgent with regard to requiring providers to submit within timely filing limits. And so we've made some estimates about if we tightened up that, how much savings there would be with regard to mandatory submission limits.
How much will that save us the rest of the year, Charlie?
Well,
Potentially.
1% is $100,000 a month.
5 months, so you're thinking 0.5, 0.4, 0.5?
Again, that's sort of the medium
400,000.
conservative.
400,000.
guess, yeah.
400,000.
That gets us to 4.6.
Number 3 is recruitment from providers. This is based on monitoring reviews. You know, our monitoring department goes out and reviews a provider, and you know, a provider says they delivered this service on this date for this amount of time, and billed us for it. And we look in their chart and see, does the chart justify that service by a properly credentialed person on such and such a date? And you know, sometimes they aren't able to properly document that, and so we can ask for that money back. We haven't been very aggressive in doing that, and we think we can generate some savings via that.
So for the next 5 months, you think you can come up with 150?
That's for the past 5 months.
Okay, so you don't have that moving for this year, for this calendar year then, 150,000?
For this fiscal year, yeah. 150,000 is what we think is
next
out
6
there that
months.
we could recoup.
Next
from
5
providers.
months, August to December.
Another
So where'd you get
unex.
4.6?
It looks like we're 6.5
Oh,
in the
you're
hole.
adding to what should be.
So I'm marking down to 4.6.
You're
So
going the other way.
Let's get those, and we'll go to, let's get the savings first, then we'll go back.
I'm
What do you
gonna
mean?
do it my way. I guess.
Hey, do it your way. How much are you saying? You saying, you know, 150,000 for the first 6 months, and then you're saying after that what?
After that, we're looking at, you know, maybe the second month.
7,000 a month. So 7 times 642. So we're looking about maybe $200,000 for the
Glad you just think
for the 12 months.
7 times 12. Yeah, 50,000 is probably a conservative guess, but maybe we're not.
150 or 50?
He's saying 50.
Okay, your tentative, we've identified 150,000 to be recouped.
That's from January till now.
And you're saying another 50?
Another 50 for the rest of
But
the
that's
year.
150 will
Okay.
affect us, and the fact is we'll get it in fiscal year.
Gotcha.
Year in now. So that's
4.4.
That assumes that the provider, you know, pays us and doesn't go out of business and, you know, all of that stuff. So we need to be conservative about that too. While Mercer and DMA were here, they directed us to look carefully at billing from the licensed independent practitioners, and that they say that their experience in looking at other areas is that there have been some misbilling there on age codes, that licensed independent practitioners have been misbilling some things, and so they strongly encouraged us to investigate that. We have not yet conducted that investigation, so I can't put a figure on that. Number 4 is service rules and limits. That's what Marcia was talking about, trying to eliminate service stacking and those kinds of things. You know, we made some estimates there. I think a conservative one there is around 1% or 100,000.
So so you're talking,
400.
you're gonna say 500,000, August, September, October, November, December, 500,000?
100,000 a month, yeah.
3.9.
You know, there will be some savings as we tighten up, you know, when we're no longer doing the VO rollover, it's hard to quantify what that's going to be.
But we don't get any of that back, that's from here on out.
Right, that would be savings in the future, and, you know, Marcia thinks it might be more than 5,000, but we're pretty clear that there probably are 5,000 of those, so, you know, if we save a little bit on each of those, that would add up to some funds there. Then we're looking at some savings around tightening up issues around PTRFs. As Marcia described, you know, folks in conduct disorders don't typically benefit from the standard PTRF treatment, and so we're trying to move some folks into the lower levels of care.
400,000?
Well, we're looking at 75,000 a month.
5 months.
If we can move 20 folks, we've got 40 youth that are, we think, sort of misplaced. So we're conservatively estimating we can maybe move 20 of those, half of those kids into a lower level of care.
3.5 still in the hole.
Charlie, in your conservative estimates, does that account for the time lag in notice and appeal where appropriate in these services?
No, I mean, we've got to take that. That's another good point. People can appeal this stuff.
Yeah.
Number 6 is additional savings generated, you know, if we really had to look at rates. Those are, you know, we got a short list there of rates that we would look at adjusting.
So the way I'm reading this plan, Charlie, it shows we're still $3.5 million to the bad,
Yeah.
coming December 31st.
And under the to the bad category, we need to add that recently there's been a rate increase for ICFMRs and for state-operated facilities. So that rate increase will be working against us. I don't have an estimate about, you know, what figures that will amount to.
And I would also point out to the board that related to some of the improvements and enhancements that we're going to need to address in a very short time period, there are going to be some additional expenses associated with that that we potentially do not have covered in our current budget.
It's not, I mean, it's not one I expect you to have right on hand, but one thing I think that would be helpful to see is currently, where do we have positions filled or not filled? And what are the particular classes sometimes in personnel and other You don't have to tell me I'm talking your head. You don't have to guess on that, I'm sure.
Of course, I think that might save us a little bit, Mandy, but
I know, Dustin.
it's a drop in a,
I'm not looking at services and not looking at
but
administration.
I agree.
And I have empathy for Charlie coming up with those numbers off the cuff. He did a good job, but I really do think we have to be cautious and conservative.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, this is a work in progress. We will continue to work on these things. DMA has suggested, you know, getting a consultant to come in and help us with some reporting and cross-functional management issues. And so we'll pursue that as well.
And what would be the timeline for something like that, Charlie? How long is that a bid process, and how long would it take before there's a consultant on the ground? And will the state DMA offer some potential alternatives for
We got the
consultants?
suggestion. I haven't looked into it.
You don't know?
I don't. You know, I kind of think there are a lot of consultants out there. I'm kind of confident that's not going to take 6 months to find somebody. I would think
Okay.
within a month or two we should be able to have something.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, this is Carl. I can't hear hardly a number of the responses, but I think it was Ryan. Are we saying that the medical, and I apologize if I didn't understand all, or didn't hear all the conversation, but has someone just explained to us that the Medicaid budget plan we have in front of us leaves us with a $3.5 million deficit in the coming year? Or was that number made up and I just didn't hear the response?
That's my guesstimate based on what we're being told today, Carl.
So has the staff come up with a plan that will get us to zero or break even?
No.
Not yet.
When can we expect to receive that plan?
I'm not
How
sure.
about, like, don't we have a regular meeting next Friday?
Yes.
Yes.
can we have, and I'm just asking as one board member, but is there a way to have a fully balanced plan that pays the bills based upon the legislators or the state government's expected revenues to us by next Friday?
Carl, I think staff can make a best effort at that. I'm not certain that we can actually zero it out with half of the year gone. But I would certainly, I think we would agree with the guidance to consider additional things to minimize that fiscal damage.
Sharon, what's your fund balance
I
right now?
guess my concern is we've just adopted a budget based upon a plan that isn't really balanced a week or within a month of it. And so now I think it's incumbent on us as a policy board, not as the management board, but as a policy board, to make sure that we have a budget that is still balanced through the year, that by the end of the next fiscal year.
Okay.
And
We share that
I'd look for
concern.
staff to come up with a plan to make that happen. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way I look at it.
We'll certainly continue to work on that. Once you get down to that level, you're kind of looking at rate cuts.
Thank you, Charlie. Folks, we're about at 11:20, so I know we've been through some intensive information. It's very important to hear from Mike Watson and Steve Owen. I think we're going to need a break. Do you want to do that before these gentlemen take the podium?
I'd rather hear from them right
Go
now.
ahead and do that and
Let's hear
then
from
take a
them.
break before we get into the rest of the meeting. Okay, I'm seeing nodded heads. Mr. Watson, Mr. Owen, if you don't mind coming up. I want to thank both of these gentlemen for the accommodation about being here today. That was on very short notice, and I'm sure it required a lot of extreme shifting with their schedules, so we really appreciate it. Something else that I want to assure both of you is that we don't have you here today because we want to be argumentative or adversarial. We sincerely want to hear any information that you have to share with the board that would generate a fuller understanding of our predicament. So thank you for being here.
And we want to hear good, bad, and the ugly.
I'm big Clint Eastwood fan. I'm Mike Watson. I'm the state Medicaid director, and this gentleman is Steve Owens, who is the chief financial officer for Medicaid. And what I want to do is just make some general comments, and then ask Steve to kind of go through the report and just talk about highlights, and that will give people a chance to ask questions. Because if you look at that, there are some technical kinds of terms and sort of managed care stuff in there that may or may not be easily understood. First of all, let me thank you for your willingness to be board members. I was a LME director for 25 years, so I have a deep appreciation, I think, for what you all deal with and for the service you do to your community, so thank you. Kind of looking at where we are right now, I don't see this as an issue of the per member per month. I look at, if we went from 133 to 119, I think that's somewhere around 10% if those are the numbers. That per member per month was certified by Mercer as actuarially sound, accepted by the Western Highlands staff and board. It does include savings. And the assumption from the General Assembly as they move forward with this Medicaid waiver rollout is there will be savings. And I think one of the interesting things today is you've had a very good conversation about where some of those savings ought to come from, and where you really have the opportunity to mix best practice, particularly for children, in a way that does generate savings. So I guess I tend to see this as really an issue of management, accountability, and maybe even more important, just having the right information to carry out the role that you assumed under the waiver. This is a very sophisticated business. I think Mercer did an excellent job. We asked them to be clear and direct, and I think if you read this report, you'll see that it is that. It's a very clear roadmap of what absolutely has to happen here and has to happen quickly. And that really is to have the kind of management reporting and data that lets people do their jobs. That focuses care management. So you know who's getting what level of care, where they are, how long they've been there, what they cost, and what are the opportunities. There's been a lot of discussion about PRTFs, just as an example. That is a statewide issue. In North Carolina, we have 600 kids in PRTFs, 350, 250 out of state. We spend over $100 million. That's a financial problem, it's a monitoring problem, it's an educational problem, it's an issue we ought to be addressing. So when you're looking at spending $12 million on PRTFs, that absolutely ought to be a focus. How do we get kids back in state? How do we get them into an appropriate, more integrated level of care? The side effect of that will be savings. Some of this really is tied to best practice. What our expectation is, and we'll have it by the first of next week, is a plan of correction, a very detailed, a very rigorous plan of correction that will involve you guys getting a consultant in here, one that we approve, to get this kind of reporting going. I think the discussion this morning is about when did you know and what did you know. You know, the reality is, once you paid your January claims, you should have had the technical ability to look at what authorizations do we have. What's our potential obligation for what happened in January? How much of that historically happens? Now, some of that's a little hard to figure out. You know, if you authorize outpatient care, you don't necessarily know when it's all going to happen. But high-cost care is either tied to bed days or it's tied to something that should have happened. So I think having the data to focus your care management, to focus on what are your high-cost services, on what are we actually spending. You know, there was talk about edits and audits. You know, making sure that things don't get through your billing system that shouldn't have been paid, that shouldn't happen at the same time, that shouldn't be stacked on top of each other. What I heard from Mercer is when they asked about edits and audits, they really didn't get a good answer. Were they in place? How long have they been in place? Were they turned off? So I think getting those kinds of things in place in your system. You know, when you talk about being, 2 or 3 or whatever million over, I'm not downplaying that. It's a big deal and a great concern. It is 3 or 4% of your per member per month recapitation. So you're not talking about having to slash services or, what you're talking about is having to manage toward where you ought to be. Somebody said, well, we got to act like a managed care. Yes, you do. That's what you signed up to do. That's where we are. And you got to have the skills to do that. And equally importantly, you've got to have the information to do that. So what you're going to get from us is a lot of attention. There's going to be a plan of correction. It's going to be monitored weekly. Using your risk pool requires our permission. That would be a very serious move. It would require a lot of attention and discussion. What I'd like Steve to do, if he would, is just kind of go through the report, just give you some idea of what we're talking about. And I think, once you get through some of the jargon, this is just common sense. What did we incur versus what are we paid? It's good business practice.
Thanks, Mike. Just one of the things about going last, just with everything I was going to say has been said. But anyway, when we decided to have Mercer come in, it's really a couple of things. Clearly, we were concerned more to actually get some validation of where things were. The second thing is we really wanted to get some sense.
Can you please speak up?
Sure. The second thing we want to do is get some sense of operations and how this is a transition. We're going from fee-for-service to managed care. So Mercer, we chose to fill in because they were the ones that were involved in setting the rates initially. They work with us in a variety of settings, so we had them come in. The team that came in from Mercer had folks from the financial side. Can you hear that better?
Carl, can you hear?
It was fading in and out there for a while, so we haven't heard much.
I'm trying.
You were flying, Carl.
Anyway, the team we put together from Mercer included financial folks, folks from IT as well as Chronicle. Again, we wanted to get a fairly comprehensive picture of where we were and what the challenges were. The report, I think the threads that run through the report, as a number of folks have said, really begin with information. What information is available or not available, when is it available, who's got it, and what is the information that we need to make sure we're managing within the dollars, because it is a fixed amount of money that you've got each month. Mercer in this report identified a series of reports that we need to get in place. We're also working, continuing to work to look at reports with specific definitions so everybody's really understands exactly what we're trying to get to, so that we can make sure we're communicating appropriately. Another factor in here they talked about was discipline communication, or financial folks and clinical folks talking. I spent 25 years in hospitals. I know how difficult it is to get, in my case, nurses and bean counters to talk, but I think it's really important to make sure that the clinical folks have the information, the financially oriented information to help them make decisions, that the financial folks understand what's going on with clinical operations. The third major kind of thread went through here were making processes and systems. Edits in place that are functional and working are vital. I can tell you at Medicaid, what we call pay and chase, which is really trying to get the money back once you've paid it out, is very difficult. On average, we only recover about $15 to $20 million a year out of a $10 billion claims program. So it's a difficult process to go out and recoup money. So it's better to stop it before it ever goes out the door. So that's the critical factor. Making sure, in addition to the information, they talk about IBNR, incurred but not reported. Really making sure that you have some way to anticipate the financial implications of what you'll face in the future. And there's both an operating issue and there's a cash issue. Making sure operationally, financially, from an accrual perspective, what it is you're going to have, where you're going to end up, and then where you stand from a cash perspective. As a board member one time, they used to always tell me, you can have your accrued revenue, but I'll take the cash. And so, you make sure you look at both of those things because they're both extremely important. There was a number of issues in here, and I know you've read it, so I'm not going to read all this stuff to you. Really talking about changes to the information system that really, I think, are aimed at trying to get tools in the hands of the people that are providing or approving the services, managing the service, so they can do their job effectively. And again, this is really what's intended to be about tools. One of the questions I asked Mercer when they came out here before they came is, I want to know some sense of the range of where we are versus potential implication or impact of changes financially for the 12 months in our contract year, which would be January to December. What did they think? From a service perspective, their view was that we probably were looking somewhere for that 12-month period was $6 to $3 million loss or shortfall. When you took into consideration the administrative savings, some of the other activities that would be input in place and so forth, they saw some potential to impact that somewhere between $3 and $6 million. So their range was a $3 million loss to a potential $3 million gain over the course of 12 months. But that assumed certain things happened too. I think so. Our commitment is that we're going to be working with you all weekly, monthly, quarterly, looking at information to try to help to make sure we know where things are so that we can support what y'all are doing to make sure that this thing ends up, hopefully on the upper side of that range that Marshall believes is appropriate. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is it possible?
I think, again, there's a lot of things that have to be done. So if you put into place the audits, put into place the reporting, put into place systems, I think you can turn this thing around.
But as we do our immediate and ongoing budget planning, a piece of the cost we need to consider are consultants and additional investments in technology. That's clear. I don't think we have any projections on the table of that. And those will be critical for us to understand.
Yeah, one of the things that's said in the Raleigh paper was that the PMPM might need to be looked at, and from what I'm looking at, it actually chose the most generous of the last 3 years as the basis, if 2009 was the basis, and as you've said, it was looked at and validated, so we're not really going to, that's not really where we're going to spend a lot of time and energy, is it?
That's not where I'd spend time now. I think that, you know, what Mercer does is they certify a range. So they say it would be okay to pay 140 to 160. Those aren't the real numbers.
Right.
What we did is we were on pretty close to the top end of the range they certified. And generally we tried to do that with LMEs in the first year.
Right.
So, you know, what's in there is kind of the minimum projected savings. And I think you hear the discussion around what can we do, what options do we have. You know, it's really starts with data. Who are your high-cost people?
Yeah.
Don't authorize 6 months worth of PRTF. That's a 30 or 60-day authorization. Have the ability to know where you're spending your money. You know, your PMPM came in categories: age, blind, disabled, pregnant women, so forth. Right now, you don't know what you're spending in those categories. You know, that would be part of a discussion, you know, as we get into next year around what should your PMPM be.
I heard you say DMA would approve the consultant, but I mean, are there resources DMA can offer about potential consultants? It really worries me that we not spend a lot of time in the process of identifying a consultant.
I think we can, what we'll do is try to help you identify somebody, or some people you can choose from. You know, one of the questions I got was, could Mercer come up and help you? The reality is they can't. I mean, there are people who watch these contracts, so they can't also serve as a contractor to you guys. What they've done, I think, is given you a very clear roadmap. And anybody who knows what they're doing should be able to come in, look at that report, talk to your staff about where you are, and look at your systems and say, do A, B, C, and D.
Can you give us a list of those organizations that you would approve?
I think we can help you find some appropriate people.
And I want to just say, from my perception, I think you have attempted to set us up for success.
And Mike, we really look forward to that finalized corrective plan of action. And I know board members will be very insistent upon that being married to some very specific timelines and thresholds for critical tasks to be performed. I would say generally my biggest concern about the things that we have to do are the IT enhancements. I mean, even if we stood on our ear, I'm concerned about how long that can take with somewhat of an antiquated system.
Well, I think
we've spent a lot of money on that IT system. I don't know that we've got an antiquated system. Will our system do what needs to be done? That's the question. Will it do it if you...
Can it be modified?
Well, I think, you know, along with your IT vendor, I think, you know, looking with your consultant, those are kind of the choices you have to make. I know one of the things that people need to keep in front of them is that if you look at House Bill 916, there are things that can be contracted out. You know, a lot of our LMEs kind of focused on being a turnkey operation. My old LME decided to delay 3 months and really switch who's doing their claims processing. Because they felt like their current vendor just wasn't there. So they've turned around and they're starting a contract with somebody. I'm not saying do that. I'm saying that as you work with your contractor and your consultant, are there things you're better off doing a different way? Are there things you can buy as opposed to do yourself?
This is Carl, may I ask the question?
Yes, Carl? Go ahead.
Under the current structure of WHN, does the executive director have the authority to implement all of the items in the Mercer report and the Medicaid budget plan as submitted to the board?
I would, within the guidance of your board, I would say certainly.
Let me ask the question again. Without any further action of the board, can the executive director implement all of the items in both reports that were given to the board today? Or is there specific board action that needs to be taken to provide the executive director with that authority?
Well, from a board perspective, I would certainly charge your executive director with moving forward with implementing the recommendations of the Mercer report and to come back to you with our plan of correction. But those are...
I'm not sure. I'm
Carl,
not
Carl.
sure I'm making myself clear.
Carl, I think the word is guidance.
Perhaps I don't understand the question. I'm
Guidance.
sorry.
I think the word is guidance.
Right, but I'm just saying I want to make sure that the person in charge of the operation, the executive director, has full authority to take all those actions that have been outlined here to make things happen, so that as we get the reports that's recommended back to the board, what I don't want to have happen is to hold the executive director's I want to make sure he's got all the authority he needs to take action and make this happen to correct the problem, so that he's not having to come back to the board for more and more authority or waiting for special board meetings, that he knows that he can go forward and fix the problem.
I think you would need to deal with issues around contracting and, you know.
And use of the risk pool would take permission.
I think the use of the risk pool is a very serious issue that would require.
Because it's a part of
that
the
would
plan.
require a discussion with the state.
What about use of our fund balance?
That is at your discretion. It strikes me as a wonderful idea.
I think it may be the only idea we have.
Mr. Chairman, can we get back a report by next Friday at our regular meeting and have it ready so that we know what we have to act on versus what the executive director already has authority to do?
Mr. Watson, you're fairly confident that we'll have a corrective action plan by the first of next week?
Our plan was on a Tuesday or something like that.
August 1st is what I was told.
Okay.
Well, we have a board meeting next week, and I want to make sure that the board has the ability and the information to take action so that we're not holding back the executive director from doing what needs to be done.
We agree with you, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mike and Cheryl?
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much for being here today.
You are going to hang around for a while, I hope. Thank you.
I am going to insist on a 10-minute
Being a
recess.
public health official.
Come back in 10 minutes.
There are additional bathrooms on this far back hall as well.
Joe, what you know?
Not too much.
Always good to see you. Behaving yourself.
Trying to.
If I'm starting to like do the aerobics with my lower back.
Got everybody back?
You got a couple? You still out?
Okay. Can you check and see who's still on the phone?
Carl, are you still on the phone? Is anybody still on the phone?
Maggie Faulkner still on the phone.
Carl, I'm still on the phone.
Carl and Maggie. both.
Is Nancy still on the phone?
Nancy, are you still on the phone?
I got to talk to you. Where have they lost their link?
Yeah.
You took a break.
Oh, no, let it close. You're allowed to close.
We got everybody? Board members, we have we're coming out of recess now. We have item 6 on our agenda about possible action items related to the information we just heard. Do we have issues that we need to address via action at this time?
Steve, I think that Carl made the suggestion, motion
Okay, thank you. I can hear you now. It was just pretty broken up there.
that at the next board meeting, that we make sure that we will have received the plan of action by the state, and that staff will have put together their plan of action to follow this and to give us a financial update of how we're going to be able to rectify the situation, and give us I guess it's a year-end report where we will be a status for, and to be looking at our fiscal year budget, where we stand, because we may have to make some changes to that budget based upon the actions that are being proposed. But that process needs to be underway.
And I think several board members have mentioned that they have taken to heart one of the recommendations related to the consultant requirements, in that we should potentially at that time review an RFR. Is that what you said, RFP or?
I would like to see the list and talk about legally, maybe that's a big question, how quickly can we move forward? Are we required to do any bid process on that? Is it a contract we can just enter?
I think this is a situation we can move very quickly.
I would agree with that.
We're gonna be under the $300,000 threshold anyway.
I wouldn't think
Well, I'd like
in
to
an emergency
actually see the
situation, I
list
wouldn't
and
think we
have
just
some-
go on.
Recommendations in the next meeting.
I would agree. The only other action item just point I would make, and it's something I talked to you about at the break, is I had several people in the audience ask that some of the financial information that we were looking at today be posted, that's already public, so that consumers and providers can see the detail of what we're talking about.
I think it's very important to be transparent at this point about those issues, so you can ask staff to do that. Anything else? Okay, I know we meet in a week, but we will. And I will throw out there just something I want you to think about before next week. I know based on the discussions I've had with board members that there is an incredible amount of focus right now on getting where we are and getting back on the right path. And one of the things that I would ask you to consider between now and next Friday is our monthly meeting schedule sufficient in the near term? I'm not entirely comfortable that it is, that we may need to actually structure some other dates, particularly in the next 30 to 60 days. I think that's a critical threshold, time threshold. So just think about that. Okay. Item 7, I hear from board members that we do want to go into closed session. So I will move to do so pursuant to subsections 143-318.11A3 and 6 of the General Statutes of North Carolina to consult with legal counsel in order to preserve the attorney-client careers and to consider personnel matters. That's the deal.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. I will ask the meeting to be restricted to board members and legal counsel. Yes, we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Appreciate the input.
Yeah, appreciate you being here. I've heard your name for decades.
And Dawn, thank you very much. Thank you. Y'all come. Y'all take a trip back.
How are you? No, we'll just take it easy. Sure.
Thank you.
Hey, Daryl. How you doing? Good.
I just want to be. Well, I missed it. Answer again. Hey, Charlie.
Mr. Gerber, together for lunch sometime.
Hang on.
Making their way back in.
I said like you down.
We're back, we call in. Okay, bye.
So Vic, as a clarification, the motion to come out of closed session was recorded in that session. We don't
Yes,
need
sir.
to do that.
And could we have a motion to seal the minutes of that closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any further discussion? Board members, after a great deal of consideration, I am going to make the motion to terminate the employment of Arthur Carter, who serves at the pleasure of this area board, from the position of area director, which employment position is also referred to as Chief Executive Officer of Western Highlands Area Authority, Western Highlands Network, and to make this termination of employment effective immediately. I would qualify this termination as without cause.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that motion.
Any discussion about the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Martin?
I move to appoint Charlie Shanghai as the acting area director and to also continue in his current employment position.
Second.
Any discussion about that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Good.